Hello and welcome back to the channel. As a photographer, I have never been particularly interested in documenting the world as the naked eye sees it. Throughout my career, the objective has always been to take the view in front of me and to make a personal impression of it, but also to try and create something aesthetically pleasing from it. At first, I struggled to understand how I was going to go about this. And it wasn't until I discovered the work of the master photographers from the latter half of the 20th century that it all began to become much clearer to me, and how they have not only inspired me and helped me to think creatively, but also how to look beyond the obvious. Their amazing work is a big part of why I decided to become a photographer. Today I'm going to be looking at 5 photographers whose work has gone a long way in helping to show me how to turn the urban environment into fine art. I will be recommending some books of the photographer's work along the way, but suffice to say they are mostly out of print. I know this can be annoying, but they do sometimes appear at a reasonable price on Amazon, so if you want a copy it's worth keeping an eye open. At the end of the video I'll be showing some of my images, some fresh from the archives, that I feel have been influenced by these great masters. Of course, I'm not suggesting that my pictures rival anything by any of them in the slightest way, but I do see their influence, and there is definitely a nod to these great photographers and their immense skill, vision and application. So let's take a look. Ernst Pass was born in Vienna in 1921, and during a 40-year career he bridged the gap between photojournalism and using the medium as an expression for creativity. Pass acquired his first camera at the age of 25, trading a £20 block of margarine for a Rolleiflex on the Vienna black market. He was an early adopter of colour photography, and he shot for the likes of Life magazine and Vogue, and was invited to become a member of the Magnum Photo Agency by Robert Capa. Becoming president of the agency enabled Haas to acquire the correct documentation to emigrate to America, where he arrived in 1950. This was at the time that the streets of New York were becoming a popular subject for photographers, and like them he sought to document the lives of New Yorkers, and his work shows a refined sense of composition and perspective. He often used a more abstract approach to his subjects, using soft focus, overexposure and depth of field techniques to great effect. While he is often remembered for his commercial work, I am mesmerised by his street work of this period. He could do everything and he was so innovative. He was almost too good, you could say, and perhaps the fact that his style was so varied has meant that it is more difficult to categorise. This may be one of the reasons that I think he is less well celebrated than some of his contemporaries. Nonetheless, I think he was a genius, and I can highly recommend this book, Colour Correction, with one reservation: it's very difficult to find, sorry. Ray Metzger really was one of the great masters of American photography, working through the second half of the 20th century and into the 21st. Metzger was born in Philadelphia, where many of his street photographs were taken. However, he was educated at the famous Institute of Design in Chicago, which was dubbed the New Bauhaus, under the tutelage of Harry Callahan and Aaron Siskind, 2 other photographers I greatly admire. After graduating, he travelled extensively in Europe before returning to America, where he taught at the Philadelphia College of Art. He spent most of his life photographing the city, making it and its inhabitants a frequent subject. He was a master of light and shadow, and his bold, experimental black and white landscapes were a big influence on me when I first started shooting. He was also an innovator, and he made some wonderful composites, assemblages and double exposures that really pushed the boundaries of photography at the time. Again, if you can find a copy, The Photographs of Ray K. Metzger is the book to go for. It's a beautifully presented overview of his career, with a nice essay by Keith F. Davis, who described Metzger's work as the very best of a classic form of American modernism that transcended any simple notion of technical experimentation or formalism to illuminate a vastly larger human realm. Harry Gruyaert is a photographer known mostly for his travel pictures and his incredible use of colour and early experiments with Kodachrome. He was looked sceptically upon as the most serious photographers at the time were still using black and white. A member of Magnum Photos, he was born in Antwerp in Belgium and studied at the School of Photo and Cinema in Brussels. He was brought up in a strict Catholic background where his father forbade him to become a photographer, seeing it as sinful. As a result, Gruyaert began travelling with his camera, in 1969 visiting Morocco, and later followed by trips to India and Egypt. His sublime compositional techniques and use of saturated colour make his work stand out, and even the most die-hard black and white enthusiast can see the appeal of his wonderful atmospheres and perfectly lit worlds. Thankfully, there are books on his work available, and I would highly recommend this volume, simply called Harry Gruyaert. It's an absorbing collection of his work over the years, and quite frankly, difficult to put down. Gianni Berengo Gardin is one of the many Italian photographers who rose to prominence after the Second World War. Against a backdrop of great art, architecture and film, it was no surprise that photography would flourish in post-war Italy. Born in 1930, Gardin, who was largely self-taught, began his photographic career working with other photographers in Paris in 1954. Turning professional in 1962, he moved to Milan and began working as a photojournalist in 1965. Although his career has involved working with subjects like the Romani people, architecture, and the people working in the automotive industry, for me his pictures of everyday life in his native Italy are the real turn-ons. Now in his 80s, he continues to live and work in Milan. Gardin has published over 200 books of photographs, and there are a few collections and retrospective volumes of his work available. My personal favourite and recommendation is Stories of a Photographer. It's the perfect collection and overview of his street work. Soullighter's work during the 1940s and 1950s was seen as making an important contribution to what became known as the New York School of Photography. He was born in Pennsylvania, and although he studied to become a rabbi, when his mother gave him a camera at the age of 12, little did he know it would change his life. He moved to New York at the age of 23 to become an artist, but he was encouraged to become a photographer. Early on, he began taking colour pictures on the streets, sometimes using Kodachrome 35mm film past its sell-by date. Much of Leiter's work features abstract scenes and innovative compositions that have a real painterly feel to them. Soullighter once said, "I happen to believe in the beauty of simple things. I believe that the most uninteresting things can be very interesting." I can see why many street photographers are inspired by Soullighter. His beguiling images and intelligent use of colour have a hypnotic effect on you. And as well as available books, there is a great 2012 feature-length documentary called In No Great Hurry, which is available on DVD, and it features Soullighter himself talking about his work. Of course, I could have listed many more photographers that have inspired me, and it's always difficult to leave people out. But the 5 photographers I've looked at today are the 5 I always seem to go back to when in need of inspiration, or when I'm simply in the mood for looking at some of the most beautifully captured moments in time. To finish with, here's a quick look at some of the moments I've captured myself over the years that have been inspired by these great masters. Thanks for watching. To see more of my work, visit my website at www.rupertvandervell.co.uk and check out my book Fine Art Street Photography, available at Amazon.